This is an exclusive video just for my patrons. I want to give you a little behind the scenes in what's going on this week, and then a little look forward at some of the stuff that I'm going to be doing in the future. This week, I'm going to be tackling the problem of making straight and square edges and corners with only using hand tools. I know a lot of people want to see the Woodwork for Humans series grow and progress and make more things like pieces of furniture, gifts, and boxes and stuff like that. Well, in order to do that, we're going to have to get to a better point of accuracy with our work. A lot of the stuff that I've made so far, like the bench and the tool tote, didn't require things to be very, very straight and square, but if we're going to start making some nice things to display in the house, we're going to need to work at a higher standard of precision. And even for experienced woodworkers, even when you're using good tools, like for instance this vintage back saw would have been a premium tool even in its day, and it's still very nice, even with this, cutting a really perfect straight line or a perfect 90 degree is quite difficult. And then that's a really quality tool. We're using less expensive tools like this Japanese Ryoba saw over here. And of course, these are capable of making straight cuts, but that doesn't mean it's easy to do that. And a big part of this series is making complicated things easier. In order to do that, we're just going to use a couple of jigs that woodworkers have been using for like hundreds of years. This one over here is called a bench hook. It's a very, very standard piece of woodworking kit. It's a platform with fence set exactly at 90 degrees. There's a little cutaway right here, and then a cleat underneath which actually hooks onto stuff. So if I were at a traditional bench, or if I were just sitting next to the low Roman bench, this just goes right like this, and then if I have, for instance, this small piece of stock and I've already drawn a line on it, I put this up against the line so that it's just, so the line I've scribed is right next to that mark there. And then here I'm using a push tool. I'm going to go in and I'm going to use that fence to guide my saw. And then what I end up with is really quite a square cut when all is said and done. Oops. So I can grab a square and have a look at this, and that is, it's not bad. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. It's a lot better than what I would have done freehand. So just this little piece is really helpful for cutting all sorts of pieces of stock. Here's another piece that I could cut, and you could go to anything sort of up to 2 or 3 inches wide, and if you have to cut larger stock than that, you can make larger bench hooks really easily. There's nothing really that exciting going on with a bench hook. These things have existed forever, and there's a million videos on them. What I wanted to do was make one that was going to work with this bench and with the specific tools that we're using. So if you're working off the side of the bench, like I am here, I'm just sitting on a milk crate, this works really well, especially with the traditional push style tool. But then if you wanted to use your Ryoba saw or a similar pull style tool, this whole thing isn't going to work because that pulling action is just going to pull the whole thing towards you. It's not going to work well at all. So what I did is I took the standard design that has this cleat at the bottom, I moved the cleat forward a little bit and I added a little cutaway. And what that does is that's going to allow me to flip it upside down and place it against the leading edge of the workbench, just like this. And then I can take a piece of wood, like this one over here, and I can put it against my stop, and now it's in a pull situation. So it's braced against the front of the bench, and it's braced against the cleat, and I'm pulling back on it instead of pushing, and I'm backing the bench up with my knee a little bit right here. I'm going to grab my Ryoba with my cross-cut teeth, and I'm going to come in. And I find using my finger against the fence is very helpful as I'm establishing that cut. And then what I have there is, that's a really good cut. That's really square. So I think I actually just did even better than I did with my push tool, that's a really good square cut. Now again, it's not perfect, and the idea of the bench hook isn't to get perfection, it's to get cuts that are pretty square and are also repeatable. So you can batch out a lot of components with something like this. This makes your components, like, let's say 90% square. It also makes it much easier to handle them because no matter where it is, it's free, it's not locked down to anything. You can slap your component in, make a cut, toss it to the side, you can flip it around, use it in the other mode. It's very easy to use. So I just made a couple of little adjustments to a standard jig, and bam, it works great. So this is thing number one. And then also this week, we're gonna work with the shooting board. If you've done any amount of hand tool woodwork, this is also not gonna be surprising to you. This one looks a tiny bit different from a standard shooting board, but not very much. In case you're not familiar with it, let me just show you the basics of how the shooting board works. The idea is that it's a straight jig, and what it does is it guides a hand plane. So here's a little Stanley number 3, and it sits, the flat of the plane sits on this track here. It's guided along this piece of hardwood that's slightly elevated, and then there's a stop. And that stop is exactly perpendicular to the guide. So there's a cleat underneath that's braced against the bench, and then I'm gonna push the work with the heel of my hand, just like this, and then I'm gonna run the plane against it. And what I'm doing is I'm cutting through that end grain until I get a nice consistent shaving. And I don't know how well this is going to show up on camera, but what I have here is a beautiful surface at the end. It needs a little light chamfering. Let me just take care of that, and then I'll get my square and check it against the reference surface. And this is beautiful. This part is dead nuts accurate. And that's going to make it really great for doing furniture work. Now, again, I'm sitting at the bench and I'm using a standard push tool, but, you know, what if I were not sitting facing the bench like I am here? I do most of my work straddling the bench, which means I don't have a convenient ledge in front of me like this. I'm sitting on the bench and it's coming out like this. I'm certainly not going to turn these things sideways and hook them against the side of the bench. That's not going to work. So what I did here for anticipating working off the end of the bench, like I normally do, is I just moved that cleat. It would usually be at the end. I moved it forward a tiny bit, and I added a second track to the shooting board on the other side. So I was using it like this. Now I'm going to flip it around, hook that cleat, let me get rid of those shavings there, hook that cleat over the end of the bench like that, and then I can take, here's the piece of white oak I was cutting a second ago, I'll put that on, I'll take my plane, and now my plane, which is a standard Western plane, can easily be used in pull mode. And I can slowly, this piece is quite out of square, so I need a little bit more iron here. Hold on just a sec. There we go. And that's the same thing. I now have a piece that is absolutely dead on. And the shooting board has been, again, it's been in use for hundreds of years. You don't need a metallic plane for it. You can use it with a wooden plane. I'm sure we can use it with the cheap planes from the Woodwork for Humans series. But this way it works in pull mode, and it also works in either direction. So if you happen to be left-handed, you don't have to do anything different. You can just put your plane on the left side and hold your stock with the right side and pull. I also anticipate we might get some Japanese planes in the future, in which case we're probably going to want a shooting board that allows for pulling. This jig and the bench hook have both been optimized for use with the low bench so that you can push stuff and pull stuff and make much more regular and even components. So I think that's really important. Now that I have your attention, let's look ahead a little bit and talk about some of the things I'm going to do in the future. So if you've been watching the Woodwork for Humans stuff, I'm sure you've noticed that the place that I have my low bench is kind of not perfect. It's just next to my assembly table and it's near the washer and dryer. The backgrounds for those shots are often not awesome. And it's sort of just jammed in. And as this is growing and it's becoming a bigger part of my channel and more of the focus, it seems dumb for me to be doing these videos in just some little out-of-the-way spot of my shop. These videos really deserve their own space. So I've started thinking about this corner right here, which is where I keep my table saw. You can see that right here, and then my dust collector is right back there, and then a disgraceful collection of scraps and sheet goods over here in the corner that's needed to be organized for as long as I've been in this shop, so like 2.5 years. So what I've decided to do is get rid of all of this stuff. I'm going to build a little bit of organization that's going to let me get rid of all of these sheet goods and move them to an unused corner of the shop. And then I'm going to take my table saw and I'm going to move it around to my assembly table. I'm going to bring my assembly table down a little bit so that it can serve as the outfeed for the table saw. I'm going to get one of my buddies in here who does electrical. He's going to route some new electricity for me, and that's going to let me plug in the table saw and the dust collector over around near my chimney, where they're going to be just a much more efficient place to use them. Right now, when I want to use the table saw for anything big, I'm already in a position where I have to roll it out, and then I usually throw like a little temporary outfeed table in front of it. I used to have it set up so that it had permanent outfeed, but then I started doing client work and my assembly table was always tied up with client work. Well, I'm really not doing client work right now, so my assembly table can become a dedicated outfeed table again. I think that's going to be way better. More importantly, when I have this space all cleared out, I'm going to have like a dedicated shop for the Woodwork for Humans series. I read a lot of historical books about woodworking, and one of the things that's interesting is that historical cabinet shops of the 17th, 18th, and 19th century were small. They were often just a little add-on room somebody put on a farmhouse. Some people worked in their barns, they worked in attics above stables, they worked in little spaces. And once I clean all of this stuff out, I'm gonna have a space that's about 12 feet by 8 feet. And what's kind of great about that is that it's the same size as a lot of people's spare rooms, corner of their garage, corner of their basement, a lot of the places that I know real woodworkers are actually working in. And I think rather than just sort of shooting in a million different locations around my shop, it would be a lot better if I made a sort of shop area and confined myself to that. Shot the videos from there, kept all my tools there, had everything organized. That would give me way more latitude to give people ideas and organization and sort of set an example for how to do great work in a limited space. I know you can do it because I've done it a lot. This is my, I don't know, I think this is my 6th shop that I've worked in, something like that. And some of them have been really tight and small and dank, and I've still pulled some decent stuff out of them. So I know if I set up a small space here with the Woodwork for Humans bench and then probably a cabinet to keep tools in, and I'll start building some other stuff like maybe a spring pole lathe and maybe a small but taller workbench for doing more cabinet stuff. So that just gives you a look ahead at the stuff that I have planned for this channel. I'm actually really excited about it because I love making just general woodworking videos, but I'm really getting excited about the Woodwork for Humans stuff, and it's getting the most feedback from the audience, the most positivity. So I'm gonna ramp that up, take it more seriously, and make it even more applicable to the home woodworker. So anyway, I'm also doing this video because my daughter and I are going home to Connecticut to visit my folks for a couple days, which is going to mean I'm going to take a week off, so there's going to be no video next week. You can follow me on Instagram at Rex Kruger if you want to see some shots of my parents' 18th century barn and farmhouse and some other things that I might be able to check out while I'm there. But I need a week off really badly. It has been a heck of a summer. So I hope everybody has a great 2 weeks, and I'll see you on Saturday with a video just like normal, and then I'll see you 2 weeks after that with my next early access video. Hope everybody's doing great. Stay safe.